So we often think of forgiveness as, just letting things go. A quick apology, a clean slate, and everyone moves on, right? But when we actually look at forgiveness through the lens of absolute, universal justice, a totally different, way more fascinating picture emerges. In this explainer, we're diving straight into the physical mechanics of redemption. We're going to look at the inescapable price of wrongdoings, and we'll explore a massive, fundamental difference in how justice is applied depending on the literal nature of who's being judged. To really get into the nuts and bolts of this, we have to start with a question that honestly leaves a lot of us just completely lost in thought. Why did God not forgive Satan his sins, yet he chooses to forgive us humans? It's a pretty jarring contrast when you sit down and think about it. On one hand, you have an ultimate spiritual being who fell from grace, and on the other, humanity. We're flawed, we're fragile, we mess up all the time. Why does one get a path back to redemption while the other absolutely does not? What is the actual mechanic at play here that splits these two fates so permanently? Well, to answer that, we basically have to fundamentally rethink what forgiveness actually is. Because, look, forgiveness isn't magic. God doesn't forgive sins by just making them poof into nothingness. We are so used to treating forgiveness like a giant cosmic eraser, wiping the chalkboard clean, or pretending something never happened. But in a realm of pure absolute justice, it literally doesn't work that way. A wrongdoing doesn't just vanish into thin air like a puff of smoke just because someone said, "I'm sorry." True justice absolutely requires a consequence. And the really crucial point here is that every single wrongdoing carries an inescapable price. No matter who you are, whether you're a celestial spirit or just an everyday human, an offense carries a real, tangible, heavy weight that has to be accounted for. You can't just drop it, you can't ignore it. Justice, by its very definition, demands a resolution. The scales of consequence have to be balanced, which means that price has to be paid by someone, period. So, if that heavy weight has to be carried, how in the world are humans ever freed from it? That brings us to what acquittal actually means. In this context, acquittal means being cleared of guilt, but definitely not because it was deserved or earned by the guilty party. Instead, the acquittal happens entirely because the sentence was served by a substitute. That inescapable price we just talked about, it's still paid in full. The strict demands of absolute justice are completely satisfied. It's just that the burden of the sentence is carried by someone else. This is why those who are forgiven can actually rejoice. It's not because their sins were quietly swept under the rug. No, they can rejoice because their burden was placed on Jesus Christ. He steps in and physically takes that massive weight of wrongdoing right out of humanity's hands so that justice is completely fulfilled. People guilty of sin are acquitted. They literally get to walk away unburdened, specifically because someone else, Jesus Christ, stood in their place and served their exact sentence for them. But we really have to look at the other side of this. What happens without that substitute? Well, without Jesus Christ stepping in to bear that weight, humanity would get the exact same sentence as Satan. The playing field of justice is totally level. Without that deliberate intervention, the inescapable price stays right in the hands of the one who committed the wrong. Standing alone before absolute justice without a substitute means there's no magical disappearing act for the sentence. You just face the full, heavy weight of the consequence. And that brings us right back to our original mystery, right? Why does humanity get a substitute, but Satan doesn't? Well, the answer is actually found in the fundamental nature of the beings themselves. Satan's inherent nature is pure spirit, but humanity, we are flesh. We are physical, blood and bone mortals. We are fundamentally different in our composition and existence from a purely spiritual entity. And when it comes down to the mechanics of this supreme justice, that difference in nature literally changes everything. Satan, because he is a spirit, simply does not benefit from this specific mechanism of forgiveness. Why? Because the entire process of this redemption was physical. Jesus Christ came in the flesh, as a man, to experience a tangible life, and ultimately to die in the flesh. The substitution only works for those who share that exact same physical nature. It's a profound truth to grasp. He came specifically to redeem those in the flesh. A spiritual being literally cannot participate in a flesh-based redemption. It all boils down to this perfect, unbreakable symmetry. Jesus Christ came in flesh, as a man, to die in flesh, to redeem those in flesh. The nature of the Savior had to perfectly match the nature of the saved. It wasn't just some arbitrary decision of who gets a pass and who doesn't. It was an incredibly precise physical mechanic of justice and substitution that entirely separates human redemption from spiritual beings. So the next time you think about forgiveness, I want you to ask yourself this. How does recognizing the sheer tangible cost and the highly specific physical mechanics of that substitution change the way you value the freedom you've been given? Thanks for joining me for this explainer. I hope it gave you a fresh perspective on a truly profound reality.